What's up, guys? I am going to go ahead and answer the Q&A thread that I had today. Looks like I got a good handful of questions here, so going to go ahead and go over those. Looks like the first question is thoughts on banana leaf or cortisolic acid as a GDA. I've used it and it's okay. I noticed that it did lower blood sugar. When I tested blood glucose after using it, kind of messed with my stomach though, and I know that it can potentially inhibit some absorption of carbohydrates, so I don't know if that is what messed with digestion. I would assume so that's probably the only thing I would look out for. I do think it does work as a GDA, so if you can tolerate it from a GI standpoint, it might be something worth using. Let's see, next one. Have you worked with many people that responded better to more than 5 grams of creatine? And if someone was to experiment on higher amounts of creatine, would you tell that person what would you tell them if they respond to higher amounts? Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think the main thing, to realize is with creatine supplementation, all you're really doing is saturating your, muscular creatine store. So that could be different for each person. It could depend on how big they are, how much creatine they're getting through food, and so on and so forth. So I noticed that the people that don't respond very well probably get quite a bit from food, or if I were to go back and look at their nutrition, maybe they eat a lot of beef. Meat in general has creatine, so someone that's bigger, that's eating a lot of beef or just meat in general, is going to have a pretty good amount of creatine in their diet. How well they absorb that probably makes a difference. Supplemental form could be a little more absorbable. So I've noticed people that are supplementing with PEDs tend to absorb it a little bit better. Or those are really the only people that I've ever seen do and make any noticeable difference between 5 grams and say 8 grams or 10 grams. So keep that in mind also. I don't think for most people that it's necessary to go over 5 grams. I mean, even smaller people, 3 grams, it's not really something you have to go overboard on, but there might be an instance, like I said, with enhanced athletes where they could go over 5 and get something out of it. Next one, what body fat percentage should a woman be at in a bulking phase? So this is going to vary greatly person to person, and this would be for guys too. What they should be at during a growth phase, it will really just depend on where their body fat set point settles, where their health kind of settles in, how much, what their preps are like. If they're getting too fat, then that's too much work to, obviously get back in shape for competition. Naturally, our bodies, if we take, let's say like a reverse diet or just a strategic plan to bring calories back up, take it slowly. Normally our bodies are pretty good about settling where they like to settle. For a lot of people, that's kind of where they need to be, really, for things to be firing, training to be good and all that stuff. So that is normally where most people will settle regardless of what you do. Their body's going to really try to get back to that point. And if you don't let it, it will inhibit, progress. So keep that in mind. Now, if that point's pretty high on someone and they're, getting a little sloppy, insulin sensitivity's going down, they're noticing a lot of fat gain in one spot, then you might want to pull back and keep that wherever your set point is. You might want to stay a little bit below that. And for women too, depending on the class, if they're in a smaller class like bikini, perhaps, or even figure, they might not really need to go super high. If they have enough muscle for the class, they might just kind of hang out at 10 pounds over stage weight or whatever it might be. So I think there needs to be a little more context to that. But in general, your body's probably going to kind of settle wherever it wants to settle. So that's normally what happens. And favorite rear delt exercise, favorite quad destroyer. So favorite quad exercise. Rear delts, I mean, I noticed just delts in general. My delts have grown the best off of higher repetitions. I don't know if that has something to do with the shape of the muscle. Very well could. And I've noticed that in other people too. I notice just in general that muscles that tend to get a lot of use indirectly during the day, like calves or delts, because you constantly, anytime you move your arms, you move it, you're moving your delts, and that's one of the prime movers that's moving your arms around. That muscles do a little bit better with more volume or at least higher reps, kind of blood volume in there. And that's not to say that I wouldn't add any compound exercises, because I like overhead pressing if that's what you want to do, or upright rows or anything like that, or heavy partial side laterals. But I'd say my favorite is probably just a plain old bent over rear delt lateral with dumbbells. If you can hit it right, it's a really good exercise. I feel like most people do it wrong. They tend to probably pinch their scapula back too much, and therefore, they're hitting a lot of trap in that movement and back. So, that's kind of a mistake. But if you can hit the movement right and keep your scapula opened up, it is a really good movement, and you can really hammer the rear delts and get a pretty good amount of overload. So that's probably my favorite. Quads. Strictly quads, I mean, you do quads and hamstrings indirectly on so many things, so they're not isolated a lot unless you're doing like a leg extension. But favorite quad destroyer, yeesh. I would say some variation of a leg press with a closer stance and maybe mid to low platform, and I can really isolate the quad, and I would probably do higher rep sets there. Or I like double tempos on those, where I would do a slower negative to begin with until I start to get pretty close to failure, and then rep it out as much as I can with a regular or quicker tempo. I like that. I mean, obviously squats, I like squats, so that's going to hit your quads pretty good amount, but it's not directly a quad exercise. I would say some variation of a leg press, or maybe a split squat, or I can do some iso holds. So I do like those. And also says, I know this is also individualized some. Sure, yeah. I mean, some of it structurally, people are going to feel different exercises better and need to adjust things accordingly. Any adaptation of Scott's Fortitude training program for women? Any changes you'll make? Not really. I mean, not that I can think of. It's gonna be pretty similar, and this is just gonna be like with anyone. You're gonna need to vary the tier that you're using, because he splits his training up into different tiers, and there's different ways you can go about it, and some of that's on you unless you're working with Scott directly. Some of that's on you as to what tier you do. Can you figure out where you need to be? And it's going to be really no different between men and women. I have men and women of all different work capacities. I have actually probably some women that have a better work capacity than a lot of the guys, just in terms of what they can handle and recover from. So I would say no. I push it. Do the training as it's written. If anything, I would notice that a woman could probably go into the higher tiers and the more aggressive parts of the programming, if I had to guess. And I had those were my main thread questions, and I had one more really good one that I wanted to cover in my messages here, and I will pull it up. Let me find it. Maybe. Oh, here it is. Okay. And this person asks about eccentric work and what are the best muscles to implement eccentric work on. So eccentric work, the negative portion of the exercise. You can do it on anything, but it's better on certain muscle groups than others. Like, for example, it's not it's not super impressive on back. I mean, you can do eccentric work on back. A lot of people have a hard enough time contracting their lats and rhomboids and teres and all these muscles anyhow. And eccentric work gets really tricky because typically, you know, during that eccentric phase, if they slow down too much, then it's just biceps. You know, say it's a rowing movement, it's just biceps kind of pulling, you know, or holding the weight as you lower slowly. So, not crazy about it on back. If you have a really good mind muscle connection, you know, with the muscle and you can contract it hard, you can definitely do it. So don't get me wrong there. I do it every once in a while, but I would say that's probably my least favorite muscle to do eccentric work on. Favorites would probably be, I mean, everything else pretty much other than that. Triceps are okay. In a press down motion, it's not, I mean, you can definitely do it. I like it with bands especially, and I do it with press downs with cables and stuff too. Again, it comes down to how well you can, you know, contract the muscle and control it. But in a pressing movement, like a close grip press on like a pin press from a dead stop and a Smith machine, or even just a close grip bench press, anything like that, any kind of maybe overhead extension with a dumbbell, you can do it a little bit better. But most other muscle groups, aside from that, chest, definitely biceps, quads, hamstrings, and even delts, you can definitely do eccentric work. I think it works really well, honestly. It's just, from that point, it's just a matter of balancing it, where you're going to put it into the program, what's enough, what's too much, because it does tend to cause more soreness, break the tissues down a little bit more. So, you know, just don't go and do negatives on every single thing you do. You're probably not going to recover very well. So those are the main questions that I had tonight. I really appreciate you guys participating, and I will definitely probably put up another thread next week. If you have any additional follow-up questions, just let me know in the comment section. All right, see you guys.